Biden, Democratic Senator Chris Coons. Thank you so much for being here. It's nice to see you in person. We've heard Democrats touting what ended up happening in the early wee hours of yesterday morning as a victory over Donald Trump. But in the end, the bill that you all voted for didn't include a lot of Democratic priorities that were initially in the deal with Speaker Johnson. So what does that portend about what's going to come up? I mean, this fight is going to happen again in March.
Well, first, happy holidays. Great to be on with you. And this is a predictor of what's likely to happen. We're not just going to have President-elect Trump as a billionaire rage tweeting at 4 a.m. We're going to have Elon Musk also injecting instability into how we tackle very complicated and important issues for our country. And while there's going to be a majority with an R next to their name in the House and the Senate and a Republican in the White House, what we saw over the last couple of days is that they don't agree with each other. What we just saw on this show was a Republican senator from Tennessee and a Republican congressman from Tennessee sharply disagreeing on what should happen with spending going forward and on exactly how it should all play out. You had to ask Senator Haggerty, do you expect a primary threat since you voted against what the president-elect asked for? So I think we're in for some really rough sailing, and it's going to be difficult for them to pass much of President-elect Trump's ambitious agenda on straight party line votes. Well, Democrats will have to be in the mix.
Well, on that, just on the raw politics of what we saw over the past few days, again, a lot of Democrats think that the way it ended up was just on the politics, was a political win. I don't hear you saying that.
Well, because I'm concerned about the American people and what this is going to mean. Mm-hmm. Yes, in a narrow sense, it was a political win in that President-elect Trump demanded all sorts of things, even threatened to primary Republicans who didn't support him and then failed to get most of what he wanted. But you're right to focus on what fell out of the package. You know, it was things like transparency in drug pricing, investments in fighting pediatric cancer, investment reviews for new American investment into China, given that Tesla has a major new factory in Shanghai. That may actually benefit Elon Musk's business. A restriction on AI-generated revenge porn on social media platforms, something that would benefit X. So I do think we should look hard at what dropped out at the last minute.
Yeah, the pediatric research was done separately, which I'll get to later, which is a good thing. I want to ask about a couple of things that President Biden is considering doing in the last days of his term. The Wall Street Journal reported this weekend that he's considering whether to commute the sentences of some, if not all, of the 40 men currently on federal death row. That includes the Boston bomber. Right. It includes those convicted of murder and hate crimes in the Tree of Life synagogue attack at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church, of course, the infamous shooting in Charlottesville. Are you okay? Excuse me, Charleston. Are you okay with that?
I have encouraged the president to seriously consider commuting the sentences to life in prison without hope of parole for these truly heinous criminals. These are people who should never be out of prison. But Pope Francis has called on President Biden, as have many other criminal justice reform leaders, faith leaders, to step aside from federal death penalties because, frankly, former President Trump directed the execution of quite a few individuals on federal death row. There are some real questions about the fairness and the process of the death penalty in the United States. And I don't know what President Biden will ultimately do, but I think there are reasons, both in terms of racial justice, due process, and what it says domestically into the world about our values, if we were to go ahead and execute all of these individuals rather than have them spend the rest of life in prison.
We're talking about some people who have real notoriety.
Literally among the worst people on the planet, yes.
But even so, you believe that it should be blanket, that he should just say that they should not be
I think he should consider on a case-by-case basis commuting their sentences of death to a sentence of life in prison without parole.
I want to play something that President Biden said in an interview about President-elect Trump.
The fact that he doesn't abide by the rules of the democracy we've established is not my concern. My job is to make a transition workable and available. The bottom line is that we can't keep this up. We can't keep up this childish game of walking away when you don't agree and not cooperating.
The fact that he doesn't abide by the rules of democracy is not my concern. You know, he spent a very long time arguing really wholeheartedly that Donald Trump poses a threat to democracy. How do you explain the difference now that he's on his way out?
Well, I think that's a misunderstanding of what he's saying there about not my concern.
Okay.
Of course, the president is gravely concerned about what President-elect Trump might do. But as President Biden repeatedly said, you can't only love your country when you win. He is committed to the process of democracy. This was a free and fair election. President-elect Trump is the president-elect of the United States. And unlike the election transition that didn't happen in 2020, when President Trump didn't attend the inauguration, when he helped inspire an armed mob to storm the Capitol on January 6th, President Biden is committed to following through with the orderly transfer of power. He still retains, as do many of us, grave concerns, particularly given who President-elect Trump is nominating to run some of the major departments, in particular Kash Patel, to be director of the FBI, to carry out retribution against a published and identified list of enemies. Of course he's concerned about that.
You're a longtime ally of Joe Biden. You sit in his former Senate seat. There was a report in the Wall Street Journal that was pretty detailed and pretty well sourced, outlining concerns about the president's mental and physical fitness going back to the start of his presidency, even cabinet members who were kept at arm's length. Is that true?
I don't know whether cabinet officials were or were not kept at arm's length.
Were there concerns
I know
about
that
him?
for years, the way I communicate with President Biden is not by hanging out at his house on the weekend or traveling with him overseas, but he calls me when he's got questions or concerns. And I'll remind you, in just the fight of the last couple of days, there are Republicans who've been saying that Joe Biden once again outsmarted them politically. So which one is it? Is he a savvy political operator who outsmarted them? Someone who had the sense to step back and let them keep fighting with each other, and in the end got exactly the spending bill that he and his administration and Democrats in Congress had been fighting for? Or is he someone who's completely AWOL? I think it's the former. And if you look at the record of his administration, how many massive legislative accomplishments he had as president and the ways he made us safer and stronger at home and abroad, I'll take that record any day.
You told Fox this week that you didn't realize that there might be something wrong until our debate. Looking back, are you comfortable with your support, the fact that you were a co-chair of his campaign, the whole thing?
I still support Joe Biden. I think he's a compassionate and decent man who has been a consequential president. But that was true. The first time I saw or heard anything that made me really question his fitness to serve a second term was that debate.
Senator, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dan.
I appreciate it.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas to you and your whole family. Thank you. And we'll go back to the discussion.